allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The record reflects that all commissioners are present. Okay, the next item on the agenda is for public comment. Is there any members of the public that would like to make any public comment? Okay, that was easy. The next item is for anyone that, and I know we have one scheduled, but anybody that would like to make an informal project review. So this is an opportunity for people in the community or having interest in a project within the community to come forward, conceptually tell us about your project so we can give you maybe some initial feedback. It's not an action item. So we have one. No, that's on the PC, right? I apologize. Okay, the consent agenda. Is there any member of the commission or of the public that would like to have any item with this on the consent agenda pulled? All right, I'd look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion approved. Second?
I second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, action items. 5, board members reporting requirements. Staff report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, members of the Historic Resources Board. A requirement of San Juan Bautista's Historic Resources Ordinance is that members of the board submit annual forms that indicate individual members' backgrounds and qualifications to serve on the HRB. We've attached the findings in the staff report. We've also distributed tonight the actual form itself, and I've received some back tonight already. So if you do have one of those areas of expertise, you can check yes. If you do not have one of those disciplines of expertise, there is a general provision that says commission membership may also include lay members who have demonstrated special interest, competence, experience, or knowledge in historic preservation. So perhaps if you check no, you might just want to underline that sentence and submit that form. And if we could receive those by the end of the week, that will take care of that.
Okay. That's listed as an action item. Do we actually need to take any action?
I think just accept the staff report and acknowledge the forms. I think that's the only action you need to take, and acknowledge that the members will be submitting these.
Okay, so not a vote?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any discussion, questions? Public comment?
All right, real quick. Yeah, there was something about a resume. The resume I'm going to give you has 35 years worth of firefighting experience on it. It really doesn't, aside from knowing what a sprinkler program looks like, I don't know if it's going to
You're protecting historic buildings.
really pertain.
No, I think that's fine. The resume is if you check yes, that you have a discipline, background in architecture or historic preservation or that type of thing. But if you check no, then that wouldn't apply.
Perfect. Okay, I have one comment, and I'm not complaining about the process or saying it's cumbersome or anything like that. I just think it's outdated in that at one time there was a separate Historic Resources Board. So people applied to be on the Historic Resources Board, and they needed qualifications and what have you. Then some years ago, the two bodies were combined. So by default, anybody that sits on the Planning Commission is a Historic Resources Board member. So I'm just wondering if it might be timely to just go back and readdress that ordinance. I don't know if you repeal it or what have you, but I'm just thinking this is an antiquated tool, in my opinion. That's my 2 cents worth.
Yes, I understand.
So noted.
But yes, in the interim, until the council or somebody can address that, I would think that everybody will get this back to you on the 17th.
Yep, very good.
Okay, did you have any comments, Ed? Okay. Okay, Next item is comments. Does any member of the Historic Resources Board members have comments?
Nope.
Nope.
City manager comments?
I'll have comments on the planning commission.
Sure. Community Development Director?
I do. I did want to share with the board that the city has received seismic retrofit plans for the mission of San Juan Bautista. Those have been prepared by a very qualified architect. They've been submitted for a plan check review. The plan check review should be just about completed, and then the seismic retrofit will take place. It won't be visibly noticeable from outside the building, but I know that they do also intend to take off some plaster that is failing and put new plaster on and do some other improvements. But the end result will be, the mission will be stabilized and improved, and it will look exactly the same.
The roof's coming off as part of the project.
Yes, they do have to take some of the roof tiles off, which they're going to preserve as best they can.
My understanding is they're going to have to drill through the adobe some odd 30 feet or so.
They do, yeah. It comes from the top all the way down, and they're basically pipes that will support the building.
Okay.
It'll make it interesting.
We did in the 80s.
All right, motion to adjourn the...
I'll motion that we adjourn the Historical Resource Board.
I second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
I support.
Okay, we'll now call to order the regular February 6th Planning Commission meeting. The record will reflect that all commissioners are present. If there's any public comment? Okay, noting none. Informal project review, as I stated earlier, this is about the opportunity for folks to come forward, tell us about a project that you would eventually like to submit a formal application for us.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did have an item for you.
We good?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Read it.
And I understand we have one tonight? I'm sorry, I had to keep looking at you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. We do have a informal project review that staff is presenting. We've taken the initiative to present this proposal. It's a pending application for the Midnight Express on Old San Juan Hollister Road. It's a proposal to construct what is an agricultural transfer warehouse station at the subject property. It's an 18-plus acre site, and they would be constructing a 14,560 square foot warehouse and would have a small number of trucks and employees that would essentially be bringing small truck deliveries to the transfer station, and then those would be loaded onto larger trucks and taken to off-site regional locations for deliveries. The property is largely located within a FEMA-identified 100-year floodplain, but the project has been designed to reflect this, and the building pad has been raised the 2 to 4 feet that is needed to stay above the 2-foot floodplain. There are also trace San Andreas faults that cross the property, and that's been studied by a geologist, and they're meeting the required fault setbacks as a result. So the project is subject to a CEQA evaluation, which staff is continuing to work on developing, but it will be advertised for a March 6th Planning Commission agenda. That's our schedule. If that slips, then we'll let the Planning Commission and the applicants know, but our schedule is to bring this back as a complete application with the CEQA evaluation on March 6th.
Okay. Are the applicants here? Do they have any information they'd like to share also?
They may be here. They weren't requested to be here since this is just an informational item.
Well, if they would like to say anything.
Sure.
They're welcome
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ann Hall, 502 Monterey Street in Hollister. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, and we have been working with staff. We think this is a good project that meets the zoning. We welcome the opportunity, I guess, next month to get official comments. But hopefully, this is going to be a successful project. So I know you can't comment on it tonight, but if during the next month in the paperwork we receive, if there's specific questions, we'd be happy to answer anything.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
George Diaz?
George Diaz, San Juan. Well, I already had a couple of my questions answered, but I still have a couple other ones, and the reason I came here tonight was so we didn't wait to the formal meeting, so we could get them maybe answered before. I'm concerned on the amount of trucks, because, not picking on them, but, or the city, there's no road out there. And so, I'm concerned on the amount of trucks, if it's going to be open publicly and privately. And I don't exactly know what they're transferring. I understand what a transfer station is, but there's different types. And you got to remember, there's a well at the northeast corner of the property and the northwest corner of the property are wells. Like I said, the trucks come noise, and you guys have let residential go into that area, so what's it going to affect noise-wise with the residents? And I don't care if the Alameda, Mission Vineyard, or San Juan Road, that whole area is going to be affected. Hours of operation. And the big one, and you guys already talked about it, but I'm going to say it again, I don't agree with 4-foot raising on the flood zone. You guys know my building, you know how high that is, and I'm a lot higher than they are, and my building's 5 foot high, so we're talking a lot more than 4 foot out there. And I'm not going to argue about the foot, but where I'm coming from, water displacement, hey, obviously we have Ann here, and she's been working on it, but in my mind, how are you going to take care of that much water displacement? And that's my concerns. That's it. I'll come back to the next meeting and listen to your guys' answers and her answer. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Any additional public comment? Can staff note for the members of the public what area on the map behind you there this is situated in?
It's this 18-acre parcel right here on Old San Juan Hollister Road. It's zoned industrial, and the transfer warehouse would be up here in the northeast corner, and the remainder of the parcel would be undeveloped at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So, I think commissioners can give feedback, correct?
Yes.
Is there any feedback anybody would like to give to the applicants?
Yeah, where are the crops coming from? How far? Mr. Chairman, how how big an area is this transfer station?
What geographical area would the project serve?
200-mile radius.
Okay. You're bringing crops in from that far?
Yeah.
I've never dealt with one of these.
My name is Maria Orozco, and actually the owner of Midnight Express, and the ones that are building that building, supposedly, if you guys give us permission. We're transporting produce, is what we transport. And,
I'm sorry, say that again?
Produce, vegetables, and for the most part vegetables, a little bit of fruits. And for the most part, we pick up everything as far south as Santa Maria and Salinas area, and bring it into we're wanting to transfer station to reorganize and take it to the Bay Area, which is Oakland, San Francisco, and surrounding areas.
Wow.
It's as far. It's nothing but produce.
I've never dealt with one. That's interesting.
My question is, why is it so important, this area, to locate the warehouse?
Well, quite frankly, we've been looking in Salinas for quite a bit of time to purchase something out there, and there was really small amount of areas and very expensive out there, so we ended up going to Hollister and checking out there. This is where we reside at, is Hollister, and there was not very much that we thought was appropriate for what we want to do. And we just came across that property, and it seemed perfect for us and for maybe future development if we're allowed to.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. Oh, she just there's a spot on there on one of the maps that says, and it's kind of near to impossible to read, but it's you have like a proposed office also?
Read it off of mine.
Well, I can't read it off yours either. Look at, that's what I'm looking at.
The proposed office area was possibly in the future, if this is a successful transfer station, they may put an office there. Right now, the focus is on the warehouse, and actually in discussion with staff, we'll probably take that off since we don't have an office plan for you to approve at this point. The only real building coming in for approval is the transfer station itself. But the idea was, when we place that there, is if they can get going, if this works out for them, they'd like to locate an office there as well. So, but that's really not part of the formal proposal at this time.
Is this going to be a refrigerated area or just a warehouse?
The warehouse would have some refrigeration in it, but...
I mean, a big refrigeration compared to the size of the building?
Actually, we're not going to be doing no refrigeration. We were, but it came out too expensive to be able to do that in this current time. So you're just going to have some warehouse itself, no refrigeration. Our trailers already have refrigeration units on them. So, and for the most part, what we do is we don't really keep anything in the building at all. It's just like come, transfer, put it all in an organized place, and then stick it back in the trucks, and the trucks are gone with the produce.
So what's the longest time that a shipment would be on your premises?
It takes us approximately maybe 2 to 3 hours for us to be able to transfer everything.
Hours?
Like all the trucks to get there, then we just take everything out, and then it takes about 2 to 3 hours for us to organize, pull it all back in, and then the drivers are off.
How many people are involved working on the premises?
Well, we have 8 employees for the most part, and to be there, like at one point, maybe 3 or 4 at a time, because usually there's some people are coming, some people are leaving. It's not really a big operation. We're pretty small business.
Thank you.
And then to kind of reiterate what George said, that is, and it's been noted, it's in a floodplain, and there's a creek right next to it also, and we have 2 well sites. To me, it's always been a swamp, which would kind of, I don't know if it qualifies as a riparian area or what it is, and I never could figure out how it was rezoned industrial to begin with, but you're going to have some problems with that, and I'm sure have you addressed where you're going to put the water, how you're going to move the water?
Yes, that's certainly something that we have to deal with, is the fact that it is in the floodplain. There are base flood elevations established there, and the intent would be for just the building to be raised, not the ground around the building. It's going to be essentially truck docks, so the fact that the building's raised relative to the asphalt around it means we're actually only raising just the footprint under the building, as opposed to if you were raising the whole site, the 4 feet, and had everything, the asphalt come up to the building. So it's a relatively small footprint. You still have to comply with all the requirements for the floodwaters to get around and through the building if need be. Those are covered under the building code. And we also have to address stormwater retention, the new state guidelines, that has to be taken care of on the site. So we are aware of those, the flood issue, and we've looked at what the base flood elevations are in that area and tried to position the building, if you notice that it's that kind of an angle, to be in line with the floodplain requirements to minimize the disturbance. And then your other question had to do with the well. The well is actually located on the property next door, and part of the conditions we've discussed with staff is, we have to maintain a certain distance away from that well with any type of structures, which we are.
Okay.
complying with that.
But it's basically sitting on the city's aquifers, what I'm saying is that this, and my big concern with diesel equipment moving in and out is spills, retention for spills. We don't want any of that. Our water's bad enough. Last thing we need is another tragedy like that. But that's my big concern with that, and the environmental sensitivity of that area. There's, like I said, there's a creek nearby and a couple other things. So this is a concern.
No, and those are legitimate concerns, and to the extent that, to state that it's on top of the aquifer is true, I would say all the buildings in that area are on top of the aquifer. I mean, it'll be as far from the well as the road is from the well, so there's already traffic going across that area. But we understand those concerns, and that would be something, they'll have an asphalt area that they're driving on, so there would be separation from the trucks to dirt. They're not going to be driving straight on dirt where you could have that soaking in. But those are all certainly things that I'm sure James will take into account when he's doing the CEQA document, and we'll have to address in the building code.
So you're talking about stormwater runoff?
And stormwater runoff will have to have a detention area on site in accordance with, the state water board's requirements, and detain it before it can go into the system.
Excuse me, what is a CPT?
CPT?
CPT.
I think the document you're looking at is from the...
It's on that map. It's the site plan. It just says CPT location.
I think that's the geologist's site plan. So can I look at it real quick?
CPT, and then you got a bunch of them out there. There's one.
CBT number 8-8?
I think those are, these are,
-7 over here.
they're probably soil sample locations. He's got the boring locations. I'm not sure what CPT stands for. But I can find out, certainly.
Okay.
This was when he was doing the trenching, and so I know the T's are where he did the trenches. Those are the bores, the CPT.
I just thought I'd ask.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Geological survey of some sort.
I think that's what the little symbol means.
Anything with a C means certified.
Certification unit.
Okay, thank you. I had one question for perhaps the city manager or the planner. Is there potential tax revenue here other than property tax? Is there any sales tax or anything like that?
I don't believe they anticipate any retail sales that would be subject to the retail sales tax law. The property tax is not inconsequential, however, and of course they'd be required to have a business license. I wanted to respond in part to the concerns of Commissioner Friel's.
Sure.
They are applying for a conditional use permit. You can anticipate that one of the conditions we will require is the preparation of the appropriate stormwater pollution prevention plan, the so-called SWIP, that will address the kinds of things you were concerned about.
Okay. I was just concerned because I think a couple developments that happened recently weren't quite prepared for and warned enough about some of the flooding issues, so I just wanted to make sure that we're fully aware that that does flood there. I've been up to my waist in water there a couple times evacuating that trailer park, so just as a heads up.
Okay, any additional comments?
Good.
All right, very well then. Thank you for your time this evening. Good luck with your project. Item 4, consent agenda. Are there any members of the commission or the public that would like to remove any items from the agenda or discuss them? Otherwise, I'd look for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is the affidavit of posting and the minutes of the August 1st meeting. Motion to approve?
I wasn't here.
I move that the consent agenda be approved.
Second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
And you're not recusing yourself, you're not voting because you weren't here.
I wasn't here.
I wasn't here either. I mean, I just showed up.
read
recently.
minutes, but was not here for
Well,
the meeting.
technically, you don't have to be here to vote on the item, but
You got my
it's
eye.
customary.
You got my eye
It's
anyway.
good. Okay.
Aye, unanimous.
I don't see anything wrong with it.
All right.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, the next one is an action item, which is to consider approval of new City Hall and Public Works Department identification signs. Staff report?
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. This was first presented to the Commission at your December meeting on December 5 of 2017, and staff presented two exhibits of municipal signs that had recently been installed, one at City Hall and one at the Public Works Corporation Yard. These were installed by Public Works staff and were not reviewed or approved by city management staff nor planning staff. We mentioned at the December meeting that these types of public identification and directional signs do not require a sign permit. They're still subject to the design guidelines, specifically Chapter 7, which focuses on signs. We have reviewed the sign proposals in context of the design guidelines and find that it meets that criteria. One of the specifics is that these be hand-carved signs, which these are, and that they be consistent with the buildings that they're associated with, which we believe they are. One of the reasons that we wanted to bring this to the Planning Commission as an informational item originally was just because they are civic signs, and so being on public buildings, they should receive some kind of a formal, commission endorsement. But also it was specifically the font quality of the signs and whether they met the standards that were expected for public buildings in San Juan Bautista. They match the city's street signs, but compared to the Luck Memorial Museum, for example, they're not necessarily of that quality. And while the design guidelines don't talk about quality of construction, if you notice in Chapter 7, the examples that they give are all very high-quality signs. So we did want to bring it to the Planning Commission's attention, really originally as an informational item, but one thing Commissioner Franco noted that he wanted to make sure, and the Commission wanted to make sure, that these signs were going through the same review and approval process as any other private sign would. And upon further review and really kind of getting up to speed on San Juan Bautista's ordinances and requirements, virtually anything that occurs in downtown, from the Mission down to 4th Street and then out to the side streets, is within a historic district. And anything within that historic district, whether it's contributing or non-contributing, does require Historic Resources Board and in some cases Planning Commission review and approval. So that is the process that should have been followed. There should have been an application made to the HRB, and then whether or not it had to go to the Planning Commission would be dependent on other factors. So we do find that it meets the criteria of the Historic Resources Ordinance also. It just didn't go through the proper process. And I would note, too, that after getting up to speed on this ordinance, there's a definition of major alteration, and there's literally nothing that doesn't fall under major alteration, other than repairing dry rot on your building to match existing. So we are going to bring back to the Planning Commission at a later date review of this ordinance, and perhaps there can be exceptions where things like, awnings, signs, moldings, paint, for example. Paint has to go to the HRB, and in some cases would have to go then to the Planning Commission. There's fees associated with that. There needs to be review associated with that. So we want to take a second look at that's really what the city wants to do, is have something like painting your building go through that kind of a review process. But that's independent of what we're doing tonight. It does require HRB review, but since this was presented to the Planning Commission in December, we decided to bring it back to the Planning Commission, and since it was the Planning Commission who wanted this outline of what the proper review process was, we wanted to bring it back to the Planning Commission. But in the future, we will be careful that anything, whether it's public or private, that's done on buildings within San Juan Bautista's historic district does go to the HRB for review and approval.
Okay.
I mean, if we have to amend that sign code to make it work, we should be doing it. You get one shot to make a first impression, and signs are one of the places where you get that one shot. And we've had to sit here and deny people's signs because they weren't good enough for San Juan Bautista. We should be consistent. Now, I'm not worried about the city applying for a permit. That's words. I want anything that happens in that district to be brought before the HRB. And that's one reason that I just cannot support this.
Okay. And I'm also very concerned about the consistency and non-professionalism of the craftsmanship in these signs. I don't think it reflects a professional quality or aesthetic, and especially for an important part of our city that this is, we need to have it look like it is professional, not handmade. That doesn't mean it can't be carved or whatever. It needs to be done by a professional. So it doesn't. To me, it looks like an amateur.
I'd like to hear what the public might have to say about that.
Yeah. So if there's no more comments here, and I'll bring it back for additional comments, I'd like to hear public comment. Do we have any cards? If not, just come forward. That's okay, George. Come forward.
George Diaz. I understand what you're saying, no argument. I understand what you said, no argument. But I gotta turn the page. We had nothing here, and now we have signs at both locations. Professional? Absolutely not. I personally like them. That's just me. But to me, it's character. And so, but I understand what you're saying with the permit and going to HRB, no argument. But the bottom line is, I think they have character, and just one guy talking, I like them.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Any additional public comment? Okay, I had just a couple comments. When I saw the signs come up, I had some concern, and I guess I made the assumption that the city manager or somebody had approved it, and had seen sketches and diagrams and what have you. And I actually was also of the assumption that the city did not need to go through that process. I think I made that statement at the last meeting. I thought somehow we were categorically exempt from that. Having said that, I don't know what professional quality means. I think if somebody had done those signs 150 years ago, that would be professional, I think. I don't know. You look at that sign back there, the old city council chamber sign, and a lot of signs around town. I don't have a problem with the signs. I know if we were to go out today and hire somebody to do it, that there would be probably a higher degree of quality. But we had nothing before. We have something now. I don't know how much money we spent. Did the people that made those signs, were they reimbursed for them? Do we know?
Was it done on company time, or was it done independently?
The signs, both signs were produced by one of our city employees. My understanding is that it was done on personal time in city facilities, so using city tools. Okay. And then donated to the city.
All right. Thank you. So I think, in my humble opinion, there's two issues here. One, does it warrant the signs removal? They're there, they're serving a purpose. If we had ordered them, from Vistaprint or, woodcarvers.com or something, they'd probably be different. But to me, that's really the issue, whether or not they'd be removed. I would be in favor of authorizing the city manager to approve the signs, and then if at some juncture somebody wants to bring forward a proposal and a budget item to get fancier signs, I would think we could go through the formal process that's been described through staff and make a decision therefore. But I would not be in favor of just removing them. I think they serve a purpose at this point.
I had a few things. Just a quick history lesson. The signs, the street signs all around town were hand-carved by a member of our community. So they were hand-carved. He was a professional carver. Matter of fact, he probably did that sign. He did the one that was on the fire department. I believe he did the original library sign. This is not the original library sign. The original one fell and got disposed of. I remember Georgiana flipped out when that happened. And so did I, because I think it was a Zeller sign. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, he was a famous artist that we had in this community, and he was actually a really nice person too. So these signs are kind of simple. In my opinion, they're a little similar to what he did. He was snarky. He did kind of some interesting work. We had, George, you probably remember this, we had a sign over at where the gas station is, and it said, it was a sign that said which way the mission was, and Zeller turned one of his inns backwards. It was just his little prank. And he donated the sign, he put it up there himself. So I get I totally get where you're at, Ernie, on the, we can't just put anything we want up here. Next thing you know, we'll see neon signs and stuff all over the place, which I kind of personally like. But I like the signs. I think, Joe did these signs. He did it just out of his own free time. He did it out of the goodness of his own heart and put the signs up. I think they have a little character, like George said. I think they have a little bit of character. I think that it showed that somebody actually cared enough to make a sign so we can identify some of these buildings. And if you look at what they're doing over here at the Public Works, it looks fantastic. So it's a big morale. I think it was a big morale boost for them also. So I'm also in favor of just leaving the signs where they are.
Well, I would be in favor of leaving them there until we can find something more professional.
I agree with Darlene, and I'm okay with the idea of just leaving the signs there temporarily until we can leave the staff look into this further, asking them to look into this and see if they can't come up with something better in the near future, because I think the city itself deserves a professional look, and I think we need to extend that to our staff to make sure that happens as we ask the other people who want to put up signs in a similar manner. So I think the city, by example, should demonstrate to all those who want to put up signs that this is the direction we want to go.
Thank you.
The other thing is that I feel comfortable with the lettering as far as they go, but the images that they put in there, they deserve to be done better, because they are representing the things that we have in San Juan. And I think that's lacking, and that needs to be improved on. How we need to resolve this temporarily, I think we can leave the signs up, but I think in the near future, is put some effort into finding some better signs put up eventually, more permanent. That's it.
Okay, any further discussion? So, I think the action item would be, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, to give direction to staff that the signs stay in place, that they look at a formal proposal to bring to the city council at their next budget hearings, which I guess will be next year, to authorize those signs or decide if they even want them. The city council may say, well, we don't want signs. I don't know what they're going to say. I mean, whether or not we have signs marking public facilities is not a decision of the planning commission. It's a decision of the city council. If they decide they want them, then it's a function of the HRB and the planning commission to approve that process. So is that clear enough direction, and then you want us to vote on that?
I think that's clear.
Okay. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed?
Aye. Nay. Nay.
Okay. So the record reflect Commissioner Franco as a nay. Thank you.
Okay.
next item is a discussion item on the cannabis ordinance. And I think what I'd like to do, if there's no objection, is, well, first, let me hear a brief staff report, then I'd like to open up to the public. And then we'll take commissioner comments, and I think the consultants here that can answer those. Is that, well, how do you think we should do this?
I was just going to provide a quick introduction. With the passage of the statewide proposition that legalized marijuana, the City Council appointed a subcommittee comprised of Councilmember Martirana and Councilmember DeVries to consider options for under what circumstances and in which locations and what types of facilities might the City of San Juan Bautista authorize the marijuana cannabis facilities in town. The city contracted with Mr. Victor Gomez, who has a business that includes consulting with a variety of agencies and companies on such matters. He drafted for the for the subcommittee's review several different options. One of those was actually presented to the community in a town hall a few weeks ago. I know many of the members of the commission were there. Subsequent to the town hall, the subcommittee has revised somewhat their recommendations, and Mr. Gomez is prepared to present the subcommittee's recommendations. So my suggestion would be, unless you want to take a break first, that Mr. Gomez have the opportunity to make that presentation, then have questions and comments from the commission and public comment.
Let's proceed in that order. Mr. Gomez? Is that okay with the rest of the...
That's fine.
Thank you.
Excellent. Honorable Commission, Mr. Chair, Victor Gomez with Pinnacle Strategy, a local consulting firm. I do public relations work, but a lot of public policy work around the cannabis law. Go up and down the state teaching folks and really giving overviews to council and legislative bodies on where we stand on medical and recreational cannabis issues. So I'm going to do a high-level review, very similar to what some of you probably heard during the joint meeting of December when we did initially review the first sort of draft of the ordinance and where the subcommittee and the council is heading. So really, again, today we're here to receive feedback from you folks on the desired uses and zoning for this ordinance. So again, Prop 64, for those of you that are not familiar, is the recreational cannabis access initiative that passed in November of 2016 that allows recreational use of cannabis throughout the state of California. In 1996, the Compassionate Use Act passed, which allowed the medical component of cannabis use. So Prop 64 took it to the new level, which allows individual members of the community to grow 6 plants for their own personal use, and also allows cannabis businesses to establish in the state of California, obviously contingent upon local ordinances and local approval. So we're here today after spending some time with the ad hoc committee and the city council to present to you this draft of the ordinance. Our next steps would be to bring it to the city council for consideration. And in addition to that, rules and regulations and operating procedures do have to be drafted and adopted by the city council as well. That could take about another 60 to 90 days after ordinance approval. And then at that time, we would then open it up for an application period, if that is the will of the council, to open it up to cannabis businesses and cannabis permitting within the city of San Juan Bautista. Other issues that are going to be considered in the future will be, in addition to that, is a cannabis business tax. So aside from folks paying an application fee, the council will at some point prior to July or August, whenever the register of voters timeline is, will have to consider placing a cannabis business tax on the ballot, likely in November of this year. So again, Prop 64 passed here in San Benito County at 56%, again allowing possession and consumption of recreational cannabis. The state has its own taxes on cannabis. They have a cultivation tax based on weight, and then there is a 15% retail excise tax at the point of sale for retail operations for both medical and recreational cannabis. Medical cannabis card holders are exempt from paying the local sales tax, which ranges anywhere from 7.5% to 9.5%, depending on the jurisdiction. Prop 64 also allows local jurisdictions to implement their own taxes on the industry, and obviously that's something that's going to be considered by the City Council. Estimated or projected state revenues for cannabis taxes will likely exceed $1 billion. The state of Colorado finished up their 2017 year with about $1.5 billion in both combined medical and recreational sales, bringing in roughly $250 million in state taxes for the state of Colorado. Likely in California, we're looking at a market of close to about $7 to $8 billion. So substantially about 6 times greater than Colorado. The taxes will be spent on a variety of issues at the state level, DUI enforcement, education, drug prevention, all of that good stuff. Here at the local level, it really depends on the council and what they want to pursue. You could pursue a general purpose tax on cannabis that would go directly into the general fund, or you could pursue a public safety tax, road tax, whatever kind of tax, what kind of specific tax you want to place on it. That's not really seen in the cannabis tax or the cannabis industry. In general, you'll see general purpose taxes being placed on the ballot for cannabis. Again, Prop 64 allows local jurisdictions to do a variety of things. Number one, you could ban recreational medical sales or businesses here within your jurisdiction. You do have currently a temporary ban that was approved by the City Council, I believe, back in December or somewhere around there. It also allows you to really customize the type of cannabis business operations you want within your city. You could allow recreational only, you could allow cultivation only, you could allow manufacturing only, or you could allow all 3 or 2, or however you want to move forward with that, or however the council desires to move forward with that. There are a variety of permits. I'm not going to go through the list, but there are over a dozen permits that could be approved by the state of California, and likely those are the ones that you would, or the council would be approving as well. They are section, I think, 030 in your ordinance. So really, in the discussions we've had with the ad hoc committee, there's been a couple of issues that we've had to sort of overcome. I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to look at the sensitive use map that was put together by your planning staff. But if you take a look at it there, that was really one of the first conversations we had, and I see that it's there before you. But you can see here in the blue radiuses a list of the sensitive uses that are within the city of San Juan Bautista. That really does put a significant limit in the areas where you can allow cannabis business operations within your city. Remember, this is a state mandate. You cannot do anything to change that. You cannot allow any type of business operations within those restricted areas. If you did, that would be vetoed by the state of California anyway, and they would not be allowed to operate and get their state permit to operate.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Definition of sensitive use.
It is listed in your ordinance, but it requires a 600-foot distance from any facility where youth are gathered. Now the state definition is I would consider that somewhat vague. I'm not an attorney, but I would consider that somewhat vague. But specifically, it would include K through 12 schools. libraries, and baseball fields and parks of such.
Okay.
And it does, on that same point, it does allow you to, or it does allow the local legislative body to go even further than that. So 600 is, the minimum, but any legislative body could go further than 600 feet. And legislative bodies can also approve other sensitive uses as well. So those are the state sensitive uses, but there are others. I work with San Benito County along with James here as well, and San Benito County did go with some setbacks on residential uses, churches. Hollister has a setback from churches as well, and other uses. But again, this is the minimum from the state. Any questions before I continue?
Just one more real quick. We have a new subdivision going in on First Street. It's going to be a pretty substantial subdivision, and there is a proposed youth park for that subdivision. So this, we're going to have to see another circle, I'm sure. And they're building it now, so it's going to be there. So before anything's, maybe that should get shown on one of these maps.
And yeah, absolutely, it should, and once that happens, it will be. With that said, as we get a little bit further into this discussion, we'll talk about the allowable zoning, and there is no allowable zoning anywhere near where that residential development is happening. So it certainly would not limit any current uses or any future uses.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, the committee has met several times. They brought me on board back in September, and we've had numerous amount of meetings and reviewed countless drafts of the ordinance. We've taken public comment as well. The ad hoc committee took public comment along with you folks back in December. They made some minor adjustments to the ordinance, and that's the ordinance that you're seeing here before you today. It does restrict cannabis operations to industrial zones only, and if you look at your map, essentially it covers currently at least these areas south of 156, limited I believe to 4 parcels currently within the city of San Juan Bautista. Obviously that could change if there are any zoning changes or proposed zoning changes in the future, but right now the ad hoc committee's recommendation to the council will be industrial zones only. Included in those industrial zones would be structured within structures as well. Cannabis cultivation can happen, is allowed to happen in California outdoors, just like any other crop. It's allowed to happen within a greenhouse, mixed light, and it's allowed to happen within a warehouse, a fully enclosed facility. The ad hoc committee is recommending to the council that only mixed light and hardened structures be allowed. Mixed use, my apologies, let me take a step back. Greenhouses were considered, but that was removed from the ordinance, so the only allowed use would be a fully enclosed facility. We are working on drafting in some kind of language that would allow transparent roofs. There are hybrid greenhouses out there that could be considered fully enclosed structures. There is a high likelihood those would be included because the walls of those facilities are a bit different than your traditional greenhouses. And the concerns around that have been really around conversations that the ad hoc committee has had with the Sheriff's Department regarding security issues around those facilities. Any applicant applying for a local cannabis business permit would have to go through a background that is a requirement from the state. The requirements that are within your ordinance are a little bit stricter. They would have to go through a significant background that would be performed by a local public safety agency, likely the San Benito County Sheriff's Department. They would go through a fingerprint-based check, but also a little bit further than just a live scan. prior to operating in the city, obviously they would have to pay all fees associated with it, so there is a cost recovery model that I'm currently working on right now that would allow your staff to recover all the time spent on reviewing any cannabis application. So when somebody submits an application, likely they would have an initial review period, which likely they would pay roughly around a $1,500 fee to have that time covered. And then the second phase of the application would be a more thorough application that would include an environmental plan. What are you going to do with the water, the runoff? What are you going to do for security? What kind of camera system are you going to have? What type of personnel are you going to have to keep the facility secure? All of that stuff will have to be reviewed by city staff, and that would likely take about another $5,500 to $6,000 to charge the applicant to recover the cost of conducting that application review as well. So again, the purpose there is to make sure that all of your staff time is 100% covered. Any agreement that comes into play through a development agreement or through a future tax, again, that would be unrestricted funding that, obviously the city council would be left to use that as at their discretion. There will be obviously restrictions on exterior signage. There certainly will not be the allowance of neon marijuana leaves flashing before everybody's eyes. And really that's not really the standard that you're seeing out there in the cannabis industry anyway. A lot of folks are really steering away from that no matter what. There will be restrictions on windows and signage and transparency through those windows, making sure that nobody from the outside and the public can actually see in these facilities. And all the signage would obviously be approved by your staff. Again, we're talking cultivation operations, dispensary operations, which are your retail sites, manufacturing operations, which include both volatile and non-volatile extraction, which I don't know how familiar you are with the industry, but a significant portion of consumer sales are shifting over to edibles, and because of that, extraction is quite important to the industry. The fastest growing demographic in cannabis consumption right now is 40 and over. So now that it's recreational, a lot of the dispensaries in San Jose that have gone live for recreational are seeing a huge injection in folks born prior to 1970. So there is a significant injection of new cannabis users or folks that are maybe trying to entertain their youth once again that they enjoyed back in the 1960s. It does also include, they came free of charge for you folks.
Okay, thank you.
It also includes distribution and testing facilities as well. It is a requirement for cultivators to have their product safety tested for pesticides and molds, and that is also included in the ordinance. We talked sensitive uses. We've looked at the sensitive use map. So again, currently we're looking at all aspects of allowed uses within industrial. There was an initial conversation about including agricultural zones that cover the northern area of the city and some in the southern area of the city as well. There were concerns with the impacts of building structures on agricultural zones. That was removed from the ordinance, but again, we're here to receive feedback from you folks on where the city council is headed with this, the allowed zoning, and the allowed types of businesses that would be allowed to operate within those facilities. Specifically, when it comes to retail, there are 2 retail permits that are allowed out there. One is your traditional retail establishment that would operate similar to any other retail site. You walk into the facility, obviously after bypassing or getting through security, and then there's also the non-storefront retail ability as well, which is close to the public, but they operate strictly like Amazon, as an Amazon model, in which they would only be allowed to conduct business within the city of San Juan Bautista and deliver to San Juan Bautista residents. The county of San Benito currently has a ban, so whoever operates this retail facility, the one or two, or how many ever the council restricts it to, would only be able to deliver within allowed jurisdictions, which currently in San Benito County is only Hollister and possibly San Juan Bautista. The county of San Benito has a ban on delivery into unincorporated areas of the county. So again, the traditional retail site or non-storefront site as well. The council is actually considering both at this time. Business operations for those retail facilities being proposed right now is 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. The state does allow operations to begin as early as 6 and end as late as 10 p.m. The council wanted to restrict that just a bit, keeping it from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. Enforcement. The enforcement, there are conversations that the ad hoc committee is having with the sheriff's department currently. The sheriff's department is obviously now open to the idea of enforcing. That would come at an additional cost to the city, but it would be, again, through a cost recovery model that would be worked into either a development agreement or into their permit fees as well. Anytime city staff spends time going out to do an inspection, or the sheriff's department or code enforcement, whoever it may be, these operators would be charged roughly around $165 an hour for those inspections, those at least annual inspections. Staff would have access to these facilities as long as they're open, right? During normal operating hours, Ed or anybody from his staff would be able to enter these facilities to check. They all, according to the current draft of the ordinance, would all be required to have 24-hour video surveillance. So at any given moment, if your staff doesn't want to leave their desk, they could at any time prop open their smartphone, go on their computer, and literally look at every single camera in every single one of these facilities to make sure nothing suspicious is going on. Biometric entry is also another requirement. So every employee of these facilities has to go through a criminal background check. Once they're approved, they all carry their own badges for entry into these facilities through every single door in those facilities. That way, staff knows, public safety knows, and the owners know who's going through what door at any given moment. So next steps, obviously we want to take some feedback from you folks here tonight as to where the City Council is going with this ordinance. We are currently reviewing the first draft of the rules, regulations, and operating procedures along with the first draft of the application. That would be released at a future date once the ordinance, if the ordinance is approved, and when and if the rules and regulations are adopted by the City Council. Anticipating some of the questions that you may have tonight, I do want to let you know that the rules and regulations is really where the City Council gets a little bit more specific or a little bit more into the weeds of the operations of these businesses. You're not going to necessarily see that in an ordinance. Really, this creates the allowance for this to happen. The rules and regulations would really be where the City Council is going to look at it at a micro level and look at what is going to be required for these businesses to operate within the city of San Juan Bautista. So again, rules and regulations and application need to be approved. Our cost recovery model needs to be approved, and then the city would be ready to open up for business at that time. So likely, I guess, best case scenario would be the ordinance would be coming to the City Council likely in March for their consideration. If adopted, would be read 30 days later for second reading and final adoption. And I'm thinking right now likely rules and regs would likely come in May. And if that is the case, it could be as soon as either July 1st or August 1st for the city to start accepting applications for cannabis business permits. So with that said, I'm done with the presentation. Thank you for your time, and I'm open to questions if you have any.
Thank you. You mentioned about an application period. What does that entail when you say a period? From what time to what time?
So it really depends on permit limiting. So in the jurisdictions that I've worked in, you likely will not see a cap on cultivation permits. You will not see a cap on distribution. You will not see a cap on manufacturing permits. It really depends on those operators actually finding somewhere to conduct business, right? And as you can tell by the map, it's going to be very limited to where they're able to operate. And it happens in other cities as well. There are some cities that have had caps. Salinas passed a cap. I think they did 4 of each. But most cities do not put caps on anything other than retail. Retail is almost always capped, no matter what. Hollister has 2, City of San Jose has 16, Salinas has 4, Seaside has 3, I believe, Delray Oaks has 1. So cities do put limits on retail permits. And the reason I'm mentioning that is you're likely not going to have an application period for anything outside of retail. Retail, you will want to put an application timeline. It doesn't have to be an RFP, but it will likely have to be disclosed that for retail applications, we will take retail applications from August 1st till September 30th, or some type of time frame. Here in San Juan, again, looking at the proposed zoning, it's going to be, I think, a challenge to some folks to find property. I don't know how open those property owners are to even allowing cannabis activity on their properties, right? So, we may open up the application period for the retail establishments, and you may not get any applications, right? So staff would then, and the council would actually have to then reopen up that period for applications.
And as the sensitive areas that you spoke here, you also, in the ordinance says that when it comes to a test facility, it can be either industrial zone or commercial.
That's correct.
So if I look at this map, along the McCollum Street, that would be allowed in there, a test facility?
Yeah, really the only area that would be allowed for that use would be, you're correct, would be that gas station sort of area. I don't know how many lots are available there, but...
So that's possible?
Correct. Yeah, and that's only for...
Test facilities.
That's only for testing facilities, and testing facilities really have minimal amount of product coming in and out. They do have small portions of product for testing, but they're not going to get an ounce or a pound of cannabis to test. It's smaller quantities.
Wow. And when it comes to restrictions, laws, and taxes, what's the difference between recreational cannabis and medicinal?
You mean the tax rates?
The tax rates, is there something different?
No, there's
not. And what about the restrictions when it comes to sensitive areas, when it comes to recreational?
There's no difference.
Okay.
Yeah, there was originally, you did have the medical law, which is MRSA, and then you had the Adult Use Act. It was merged through SB 94 last year, and now it's one piece of legislation.
And how does all this ordinance affect residents when it comes to a law? Are we still allowed to have 5 per resident?
6.
That's correct. You are, through Prop 64, you are allowed to grow 6 plants. The only kind of restrictions that individuals have at their residence, the only restrictions that are allowed to be placed on personal cultivation is outdoor use. So according to Prop 64, if I live in Hollister, Hollister doesn't have a ban on outdoor backyard grow, so I could grow 6 plants in the middle of the grass, right, if I wanted to. Other communities, and I think San Juan, I want to say San Juan placed a ban, and I apologize, I'm not familiar with the personal cultivation ordinance here, but I believe you guys did put a restriction on outdoor cultivation. So you are able to grow 6 plants in a detached locked unit. Essentially, you know, there are, interesting enough, you know, this industry is creating, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there creating a lot of new things for the industry, and you could literally get customized cannabis greenhouses now in Watsonville that specifically fit 6 plants for you to grow. They are locked, and they're very creative, very technological. It's push button. I'm not encouraging you to go purchase one, but they're push button, essentially turnkey, nutrients, watering, all of that stuff happens literally automatically if you pay for that model. And so it's getting pretty crafty out there, but really the only restriction is the outdoor component.
Coming soon to Tractor Supply. That's cool. Okay, I'd really like to open up soon to public comment. Is there any more questions from the consultant at this point? And we can bring him back up. Is there any more questions right now?
Got a couple of comments on the ordinance, huh?
Okay, so I'd like to open up to public comment. Or is that okay, Mr. Franco? Yeah. She's going to... What's she doing?
Sorry, no, that hasn't.
You know, I'd like to see.
It's still what you want.
Thank you very much, sorry,
Honestly, I'd like to
Mr.
see
Chair
this circle.
and members of the commission, thank you for the time. I have prepared some comments that I'm going to be discussing at the Strategic Planning Committee, and I would like to discuss that as my own opinion, not representing that body. But
What's your name?
my name is Mandisa Snody, San Juan City resident, member of the Strategic Planning Committee, but I'm speaking on my own behalf today. So I'm asking for consideration that the designation of all commercial cannabis cultivation activities in agricultural zoned areas staying in alignment with the general plan implementation matrix. I found 3 open space elements which are the responsibility of this planning commission. Open space 4.4311 permit agricultural support uses in the zoning ordinance to locate in agricultural and industrial areas on the urban fringe. Open space 4312, permit only agricultural-related uses in areas designated agriculture. Uses associated with the growing and or production of agricultural products, which cannabis is defined as an agricultural product and not a crop. Open space 4341, support existing agricultural operations and encourage diversification, including organic, value-added, small-scale, sustainable, and community-supported agricultural practices. So it seems to me that the recommendation of this ad hoc committee was, instead of supporting sustainable agricultural product being cultivated in our only agricultural zone, the idea was to just restrict that zoning completely and keep all cultivation of an agricultural product in an industrial zone and actually prevent it from being in an agricultural zone. I don't think that that's in alignment with our general plan. I would like this this commission to consider staying more in alignment with our general plan. Second one is to create a discretionary review procedure of any development, building structures or points, mount foundations, etc., in relation to commercial cannabis activity. This relates to economic development 4221, create discretionary review procedures of development of prime agricultural properties. Even though we have some of these properties zoned industrial, they are agriculture. They have traditional organic agricultural happening. Even though it's zoned industrial, if you go out there and you look, it's actually agriculture. This is also responsibility of the Planning Commission. Create zoning for cannabis processing areas, potentially to create complementary businesses. The proposed cultivation activities in the county, because the county is considering cultivation only with no processing, manufacturing, distribution, transportation. So our economic development 4111, zone areas for agricultural processing.
And the fourth comment is to provide wording for proposed ordinance addressing city water uses by proposed commercial activities, encouraging fully sustainable practices to prevent, reduce, or eliminate any possible contaminations as a result of the said cannabis businesses. This is the health element 6141, to prevent, reduce, or eliminate soil or water contamination from industrial and agricultural operations by working with property owners and regional agencies. And because of our historic water issues, I would just say that be included in the planning process, in the application process, that these potential businesses and operations discuss and basically disclose their plan for water. I think that having new businesses hooked up to city water could, because they're within city limits, could, cause a potential problem. So, other than that, from my interpretation of the ordinance was that there were two dispensaries, but both of them were, there is no distinction between the two of them, that they were both non-storefront delivery, which means non-storefront dispensary, which means they would be delivery only. And if the commission takes, and the city council takes the time to research cannabis businesses' security issues related to delivery, every single cannabis business that delivers gets robbed, every single one. It is the most secure, in my opinion, the business model that has the most security issues. And then, of course, you're robbing those who need medicinal cannabis from the opportunity of having community, which was the whole basis of the Compassionate Use Act, which now has been taken away to promote commercial. So because there are, elders in this town who need medical cannabis, we have children in this town who need medical cannabis, people with epilepsy, people with autism, who need community to support one another. And there also was talk about a personal use registration requirement. And I would just improve... Can
you wrap it up, Mandy?
Oh, I'm off. Time. Well, I mean, I could...
Well, yeah, I mean, if you've got a few last-minute thoughts, go ahead.
Last-minute thoughts is that I appreciate all your due diligence and your research, because that's how we're going to have sound policy. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Okay. So I had a few comments.
Mr. Chair, if I could just one clarification really quick. And I apologize, Andisa's comments reminded me that currently the council is looking at 2 retail permits for the city of San Juan. There was initially the inclusion of both non-storefront and storefront retail permits for either one of those 2. Both of them are considered retail. It was then removed to only allow non-storefront, and that's really the last public discussion that we had as a legislative body, the council did. Since that time, the ad hoc committee has reconsidered that position and is now looking at both of those permits being either or. So you could have 2 storefront retail permits or whatever, and really the reasoning behind that, Mr. Chair, was pass-through traffic. The city of San Juan really, from my perspective, I used to own pizza franchises, and so we take demographics into account. San Juan just doesn't have enough of a customer base to serve 2 dispensaries, so you would probably depend a lot on pass-through traffic. So that was really the reasoning behind that. So I just wanted to clarify that really quick.
So let me ask you a question about that, because in the September issuance of the state document, there was no designation. I mean, several cities that I've wrote ordinances for or done security work for required a separation. So the dispensary had to be here, the walk in the door and purchase, and then growth had to be here, or delivery businesses. Is there any discussion about requiring separation?
There is. So at the state level, you do have to have, I believe the language is distinctive premises. So you actually have to be able to walk out of one facility and walk into another. You can't have a blend. You can't be vertically integrated as some other.
So since that's already incorporated in state law, our option would be to make it more stringent, so that's probably covered then.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I did have some more comments. I'm concerned about limiting the use to where it is on the purple map. And my concerns go like this. First of all, we heard objection at one public hearing from a landowner there that said, no way would he allow that. Secondly, we just heard from an applicant tonight that would essentially reduce that footprint by about 25%. And lastly, I think it puts those property owners at an unfair advantage and puts other property owners at a disadvantaged situation. I think that the provisions of the state code and what you have incorporated into the proposed city ordinance, draft ordinance, relative to youth activities and sensitive use areas, youth activities and other sensitive use areas does eliminate a lot of that footprint, and you may have addressed this, Mr. Gomez, but I think that the ordinance should provide for dispensaries or these facilities to be in either commercial, so industrial, commercial, and perhaps even mixed-use designations. So I think that would incorporate that area that you talked about possibly being a testing facility location, like out on McCollum Street. But I think the city is basically, and I don't know if anybody has a conflict of interest here in this process or what have you, but they're essentially taking a very small group of property owners and putting them in a situation where either A, you can benefit from this process, and I know there's already a speculator that is either purchased or is in the process of purchasing one of those parcels just because of this issue. I don't see any convincingly persuasive argument from a land use perspective and a zoning perspective why, like those properties out here at the end of McCollum, across from the gas station, couldn't serve that need. I would not be in favor so it's already protected by the sensitive use bubble map. But for instance, let's say there was like a little 200 square foot or an area within the historic district. I would not be in favor of that. And I've had that discussion with some people that years ago approached us about that or the possibility of doing this. So my immediate comment would be that the ordinance should allow for areas other than the industrial zones, that we should consider commercial designations and mixed use. And I say that with a great deal of confidence that when somebody comes before this body, they're asking us to evaluate the appropriateness of a project, whether it would be, and I'll just make something up, a car sales lot, or a restaurant, or a daycare center, whatever the use of that land is going to be. But I think that this is highly restrictive. And secondly, I think that the city's going through a lengthy process here of not only hiring the consultant to be involved in this, spending a lot of time, but we're limiting the opportunities of what could be, as what you describe, a great opportunity. Now, you asked about sales tax, and so what he was referring to was state sales tax, just, like you would pay for a package of gum. But the city would impose other taxes. I just read the Northwest Business Journal, and your figure was exactly what they said. They identified California as in that $8 billion range. But they also said over the next 10 years they would predict that to increase 23 times. So the city would have an opportunity for great revenues here. And what I've seen in other cities is, like in a grow situation, if you have 100 square feet of grow, or 1,000 or 200,000, whatever the limitation is, that business owner is taxed by the square footage. And whether they have a successful crop or not, that's city revenue. I think the city has gone to a lot of time and energy here. I think we're limiting the potential and opportunity by just like letting one person perhaps come into an area on a very small footprint, which is about to get reduced again by about 25%, where there could be other appropriate areas and uses. I could very well see a well-done dispensary with all the, not only state requirements, but more stringent requirements that the city could place within its rules and operating procedures and regulations, be, for instance, across from Valero gas station. So that's my 2 cents worth. I think that the ordinance, as far as from a land use perspective, is too restrictive, and we should identify other areas to allow other opportunities. My last couple of comments were, you actually may have covered these in your presentation. We talked about tax, sewer district, place where youth. Oh, and I'd also like to see in the ordinance, and I didn't see it, but it is in the state law, so I guess it would be okay, that they would have to have permission of the landowner. That's not in the ordinance. I didn't see that.
That's automatic.
It's in the state law, though.
You're correct, Mr. Chair. It's not in the ordinance. It will be in the rules and regulations.
Permits, okay.
But it is in the state law as well.
Yeah. Okay, the following comments. Mr. Pringle?
Yeah, I guess you see things a little differently here. We have the ordinance says the M district, manufacturing. Okay. There's no guarantee that any of those guys may want to sell or lease or sell to somebody who wants a cannabis business. And it is not this, I don't think it's the city's function to make sure that we can put something someplace. This is a real estate thing. This is free market. And so all of a sudden, say downtown, just because I have a commercial district and you want to put an ice cream shop in it, I don't have to lease it to you. And the same thing with the guys in the purple zones. They have it, and one thing about real estate deals, they're deals. When the price is right, things move. So we can't say that guy's never going to do something else on his property. And so I would be very hesitant to try and say, well, gee, they said, business is business, and that's where deals are cut. The other thing is that if you want to say we're going to put it in the commercial zones, any commercial zone, whatever it is, whatever use is allowed there is allowed in all of them. So you be very careful where you put them, because it's a place where you may not want it, but if you said it can go in this commercial district, and I've got a commercial district, and you don't want it there, wait a minute. This thing is, all commercial zones are treated equally. And I'll be very hesitant to, again, start moving and say, well, only in this commercial zone. You'd have to rezone it to something else. And I don't know, because I just see no guarantee. Even when you ask for a permit, you're asking. If you have to ask, it can be approved, denied, or modified from what you want. So we're on some really touchy grounds here. A couple of comments I did have on this thing. The consultant is here.
He's in the back.
The consultant is here. If you look on page 17 of this draft, you go down to E8. Now go up to E period. A cannabis facility shall take all necessary and reasonable steps to prevent, preventing cannabis possession or use on federal property. If you prevent, that means it's allowed.
It's a typo.
I'm sorry, what section?
That word, the number, and E8, you gotta get rid of that first word.
Page, I'm sorry.
Oh, 17.
17, thank you, yeah, I'm sure it's a typo.
17,
Under reference.
E8. Preventing, and preventing, when you have two of them, it's a positive. So that means you'd be preventing, you would be allowing cannabis possession on or use on federal property.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Like I said, I'm kind of a sticker because when it goes to the council, I don't want them taking it back or arguing over something that should have been caught by us. And then the next page on 18, you've got D. A lot of discussion of exterior lighting. We have a dark sky ordinance. You might want to just shoot the dark sky ordinance and its regulations in D. And then on page 20, A is under 531-260. The city manager or their designees. How many city managers do we have?
One.
I think it means designees, like they could send the fire chief down there, they could send code enforcement.
The manager or their
Assistants.
Oh, it's spelled.
Again, it's just one of those things that,
His or her.
that's the thing that can cause you people to discuss. People don't understand anything, but they can understand a misspelled word. My thing is, clean it up so when we send it up there, it's ready, no discussion, move to approve. Okay, that's kind of what I had to say.
I found a typo error on page 5, section C. It identifies section 5.42.120. I believe that should be 5.31 and not 42.
Thank you, yeah.
Always get this extra set of eyes.
Always helps, thank you. As I look at this ordinance, it actually is embedded in my head now, so.
I know you put words in there that don't even exist. I've done that.
Mr. Chris?
Concern about using the ag land. This can't, now under our ordinance, if the ag land is used, is it just an open crop, like a tomato field? I mean, or does it have to be in the secured facilities?
Yeah, currently the way the ordinance is drafted is if you would expand to agricultural zones, it would still have the same structural requirements. So it would still have to be a fully enclosed facility. And in the rules and regulations, you're likely going to have a security fencing as well.
So we're going to have, yeah, so then a chunk of prime ag land now has concrete and asphalt on top of it, and turning it back into prime ag land is expensive.
Yeah, and that was one of the concerns that was brought up by Councilmember DeVries and the ad hoc committee.
Okay, thank you.
What's the category, the USDA category for this land? Is it class 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure.
Because 1 and 2 is prime ag land, and that's the thing that
it's
you're
all
getting at.
prime ag land, I'm not sure the designation.
Yeah, but like I say, in those 1 and 2, you got to be real sensitive about that. It's not a replenishable resource.
Well, but keep this in mind. A planning commission and a city council prior to us took the general plan that had been approved and magically, mystically put that purple overlay over prime ag land. So if anybody thinks that's always been industrial, you're mistaken. The previous
City, yeah.
the previous general plan called for that to all be prime ag land, and a bunch of those yellow areas where we've built houses since.
Yeah.
That's not what's on the agenda right now. What's on the agenda right now is, what are we going to do about the zoning?
Right, well, what was, the discussion item though was about the prime ag land and its significance or insignificance.
Well, there's only one little pie piece within the city limits that's up for grabs, and a large chunk of that is going to get taken away as soon as the sensitive area, the circle, is created for the
park.
For the new development down there, because they're going to have a park there. They'll have a park there, so.
Correct. Anything else, Mr. Frios?
No.
Madam Vice Chair?
No, not at this point.
I think I got everything covered as far as my comments. You guys pretty much answered some of my same concerns too, so if I had any comments. I just want to make sure that, I think I go along with John when he says that you might want to look at commercial as well. I don't think it's going to affect the other commercial properties because they're going to be within the sphere of
The
sensitivity.
Yes.
Of 600 feet, so that has to be, that's part of the restriction that's already built in. So that would be the only thing I would recommend if we were going to make a decision that we would vote on, if we're going to give them any feedback, would be that. Because we felt that, I think we all feel that there's just not that much out there that we could start a business with as far as that goes. And if this is going to be something good for the city, then we need to be more receptive.
Okay.
And I think
I agree
we're
with
too
that.
restricted.
There's also probably, in the Copperleaf, there's also probably a park area in that, I believe. So that may expand the sphere sensitivity also.
I don't remember.
So is it?
There's supposed to be a park at the end of the...
By the floodplain area?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the floodplain area.
That's right. The state law specifically addresses youth activities.
Yeah.
And this map, and to address Mr. Franklin's concern, all the other commercial districts or areas would pretty much be included in that. So the only other viable possible opportunities would be out there by the Valero gas station across from the cemetery, that area, and...
A little down here.
Yeah, a little corner by San Juan Hollister Road.
Mr. Chair, if I could just get some clarification so I can share with the ad hoc committee, though half of it is here with us today, but regarding your conversation on commercial zoning, are you talking about expanding? So right now, the only use in commercial is testing. Are you saying add all other license types to commercial zoning?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. Just wanted the clarification on that.
So we did.
Okay, so just a reminder to the commission, this is actually not an action item, but what we're to be doing here is discussion is providing some direction, I think, to the...
Well, I think it's agree on a feedback statement.
Okay.
And I think...
Suggestions.
I think that's where we're headed in that one statement saying that we're in favor of, I think as a commission to feedback to them saying that we're okay with everything except for the commercial part where we'd like to include that. That's it.
Okay. So do you want to summarize that as a...
I recommend that I would agree to recommend to the city council that we would include the commercial portion that is available to be included with the industrial as far as zoning, what would be commercially viable for cannabis manufacturing, distribution, just everything.
Activities.
All activities, all cannabis...
All activities.
Okay, so that would include commercial, mixed use, industrial...
Mixed use isn't a go.
No, we didn't say mixed use.
Okay.
Because you got people living downstairs
Mr. Chair?
or upstairs.
Can you table the motion for a moment? Maybe I might be able to address that and address the commission.
Sure.
And again, to Commissioner
Medeiros.
To Commissioner Medeiros' point, I don't mean to thwart his motion in any respect, but just, again, to ask that it be tabled for a moment and give you some insight as to how myself and the ad hoc committee, consisting of myself and Councilman Mayorana and our consultant, Victor Gomez, have come to the conclusions that we have. And I think it's important for this commission to understand. The first question was, should the city of San Juan Bautista participate in this green wave, they call it, which is to participate in the cannabis industry in the state of California? And if we should, if the answer to that is yes, in what way? And in what way depends then upon, then you start splitting things up. If the answer to the first question is yes, then you say, okay, well, should it be growing, should it be manufacturing, distributing, retail sales, etc.? And if you, as you go down those rabbit holes, then you start asking the question of where should this take place? When you look at our little city, our little hamlet, our little village. Notwithstanding the 600-foot prohibitions that exist, it seemed to make sense to take place in certain locales. And what we concluded was that it only made sense to occur in industrial type zoning. And the reason for that was not only the locations for those industrially type zoned areas, but also because of the activities themselves. Cannabis manufacturing, and I'm not a cannabis user, so I'm coming to this brand new, but cannabis manufacturing, I've been told, involves the use of chemicals and some other kind of onerous things, to where it made sense to locate those things only within industrial type zoning. And the other thing that we were cognizant of is the environmental impacts that are involved, to try to stay away from some kind of EIR report and the costs that were associated with same. So we thought, therefore, it made sense to locate, if the answer to the first question was yes, the city of San Juan Bautista wants to participate in the cannabis green wave, then the only place where it would make sense is in industrially zoned properties only. And that's what you have before you. The participation is in the way that we have set forth in the ordinance. So, I mean, that's basically it. If you have any questions for the ad hoc committee, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Dries. Any questions?
No.
Okay, so you want to summarize your motion here?
Yeah, because the final decision is going to be city council anyway, so. But I still think the feedback should be, continue with, make a motion that we agree on, that we would include when it comes to cannabis, that we manufacture, produce, and distribute it on, not only on industrial zone that we have, as we see it in the map, but also to include the commercial zone. That's available and not being restricted.
Outside of the, yes, that's a typical sphere.
Okay, is everybody in concurrence with that? No?
No.
Okay. So, are you in concurrence with that?
Yes.
Are you in concurrence with that? Yeah. Okay, so the majority of the commission made that recommendation.
We say all license types
Yes, all
in
license
that
types.
motion?
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
Because, to Mr. DeVries' point, I mean, some of these could have potential high impacts as far as chemicals. A dispensary would not. But again, each one of those would have to come before
The permit process.
on an individual case.
With restrictions or whatever.
Are you worried that it was...
And then it's still city council's final approval.
Pandora's box into the rest of the...
No, I just figured the industrial area keeps it out of downtown, which already has problems with, it's crowded with the blue lines.
Okay, item 7, comments and reports. Planning commissioners. Just really quickly, I still have not heard anything back about a joint planning commission meeting, so
God.
we'll see where that goes.
On and on it goes.
And I personally don't have any other comments. Mr. Franklin?
Yeah, we were going to get a report on Rancho Vista, the status of the subdivision at the north end of town. That was in December. You mentioned we'd get one in January, but we didn't meet.
And that was the report to which I referenced when I said I had a report under the Planning Commission, so if that's, you want to jump to that, I'd be happy to.
Hang on a second, you have any more comments?
Yeah. Can we get a report on the status of Harvey's lockup? The Planning Commission followed that for 2-3 years, trying to get him to comply with the conditions of approval. And it was like pulling teeth to get it, but the former city manager was right on it, and they were complying. We didn't have sprinkling in there. We'd had people living up there in the fire hazard area. So it's come a long ways. Curb, gutter, sidewalk, all the improvements that had been agreed to from the signed use permit, but had never been implemented. So we were getting a report, every couple of months. So if you could get us something like that.
I can report on that this evening as well.
Oh, okay. And then Planning Commission over the last several years has had a program to recognize the residential and non-residential uses who have done something significantly to improve the property view, whatever, to make the city look better. And we gave it to Vertigo because they cleaned up that 4 walls and a roof and gave us a real nice thing there. Somebody else, I think Ponzini, when they picked up their building. This is generally done in May, which is a historic recognition month or whatever, beautification month or whatever. And I just wondering if the chairman of the commission is going to continue that process.
Sure. Can we get staff to put out some kind of notification in the community about that process? I think that, we would recognize them, but I'd like to see people, submit their projects for our review.
Well, we generally had a couple of the commissions went out and, they pull this information, but whatever works.
Is this a project you want to recommend to the city council?
No, the commission's already been doing this. What was it, right now, the church across the street from, the Masonic Temple is one. They have...
The process question, not in any specific case.
So the process in the past, Ed, has been that the chairman has appointed, 2 members. They go out, they identify projects on their own. So I'm prepared to do that at the next meeting.
If that's been your practice, I think.
Yeah.
In my experience, that's typically the kind of policy issue that the council addresses. If the city wants to recognize something, it's the council that recognizes it.
Okay.
It goes up there ultimately.
It goes to the city council.
Yeah, that's the final word is made.
But secondly, so let's bring that back to the next meeting as agenda item, to appoint 2 members to the...
Historical Resource Board, right?
Yeah.
It's a start there, yeah.
HRB, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then after we take that action, if we can get some notice out to the public that we're in the process of doing that, and then if they have a project they think is worthy, that they could notify the 2 members. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for reminding me of this.
The last thing I wanted to say was that in the minutes of the meeting, I wasn't here, they used the term disapproving a conditional use permit. What is disapprove? Either approve or deny. Denial of a permit, not a
Somebody refresh my memory with that. What was the issue?
On the 3rd page of the minutes, of the August minutes.
This one? Okay.
And you go down about half a dozen lines, it says Resolution 2017-21, disapproving. I don't know, it's just something that, bring it up to staff to keep in mind that, not to let that one get through.
Well, disapprove is, of course, the appropriate word. It may not be the one that you would prefer, but you can prefer.
Okay.
Okay, and La Suena is spelled wrong.
The what?
La Suena, the road.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, because it's on that map that the consultant submitted. It's spelled wrong there too, so.
All right. And I know you know this, but just as a reminder, when we go to approve the minutes, if anybody wants to pull those and make corrections, we can do that. All right. Commissioner Frios?
Yep, I'm glad you brought up Harvey lockup, because remember I asked about the fire sprinkler system, it's still not active. I remember being on the fire department, we wanted fire sprinklers, somehow it didn't happen, and then finally we got fire sprinklers, but it does no good if the system's shut off, so.
It's not operational.
Yeah, so that's a concern, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, so.
Anything else, Scott?
Probably when I'm halfway home, but no.
David? Money, Mr. Chair? Yes.
No, I don't have any other concerns right now, but I'm glad that we are talking about Harvey's lockup, since I live close to there.
And the city manager's going to report on that.
Being that you brought some, what about the City of San Juan Bautista's monument sign? Is that still being worked on? Is somebody still working on that? At the corner of Alameda and Nyland Lane, or whatever they call that out there? I understand the San Juan Committee is working, and the Strategic Planning Committee is working on a monument sign for the City of San Juan Bautista. And it was brought up, it was mentioned in the August 1st minutes, and it said it was going to be picked up again in September. I wonder if that got picked up again in September as far as an agenda item.
It hasn't been brought back to us.
It hasn't been brought back to us, but I do know, because I do attend San Juan Committee meetings, that it's still in process, so they haven't done a whole lot with it yet, but they are still discussing it at their meetings. They've come up with some ideas of what they'd like.
And they'll bring that to us at some point.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
anything else?
they'll take that to strategic.
I know staff was working on it with the committee, and just wondered where that was at, and that was a while back when I was involved, but but that's back then.
Yeah, when they figure it out, they're going to probably take it to strategic planning and then through the rest of the process.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, we'll take your reports, whatever order. Ed, there's been some questions, so whatever.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, ironically, maybe not ironic, or coincidentally, I had a contact this afternoon from individuals who used to live in the community and who reminded us that not just the base maps have misspelled La Suen, but also the street sign itself. And so we will be devising that. So the map that was presented tonight by the consultant was actually based on the county's base map, and we've asked the county to correct that misspelling. With respect to Harvey's lockup, as you all know, in 2015 you approved a conditional use permit with a series of conditions, the most obvious of which to me was the construction of sidewalk, curb and gutter on all four sides of the facility. This afternoon, our contract city planner, our city engineer, and our assistant city manager went out and spoke with the owners and managers of Harvey's and impressed upon them the importance of getting on with fulfilling all of the requirements, and we'll make sure that the requirements includes the sprinklers, because the option for them is that their conditional use permit would be withdrawn. There's a process, as you know, for how you do that. Our intention was to seek compliance, not to threaten enforcement, but we wanted them to be aware of that condition. With respect to the sidewalks on Church Street, we learned that although it had been designed a year and a half ago, it still has not been constructed. We heard some excuses about how power poles need to be moved, and that requires PG&E response. I immediately contacted PG&E, and we'll have that resolved tomorrow. So we're trying to remove all the excuses for meeting the conditions, but reminding them of their obligation to meet all of those conditions. Again, our staff's perspective is that it's better to try to seek compliance as quickly as we can rather than to go through the revocation process.
Okay, we appreciate that.
So just a quick comment on that, Ed, and to Scott's point. So if they haven't corrected that fire sprinkler issue, I mean, it's obviously a life safety issue. It's a violation of the fire code. I don't know what you can do, issue a cease and desist offer. But, I mean, that's as simple as calling us, I'm preaching the choir, that's as simple as calling a sprinkler company and getting them out there to fix it.
Is anybody living up there right now?
Yes.
There is?
Yep.
Somebody habitating it?
There's always been some type of residence in that building for,
Either Jim or I are able to respond this evening to that question, we don't know.
Okay. All right. But I think the sprinkler issue should just be that should be a real,
I think that's a
I hate to say it
priority.
this way, but a hot issue, you know.
when we did,
That's a big priority.
when we
yes.
did the insurance, the ISO testing 20 years ago, that was the biggest target hazard we had in town, mainly because our water system was so terrible at the time. The water system's been upgraded, but it's still the largest target hazard aside from the Mission. So that was a big concern when they wanted to stuff a bunch of storage in it, so that's where all...
And who knows what's in there?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
The last and most perhaps more important to all of you, you wanted to have an update on the Rancho Vista subdivision. We reported to the City Council with a comprehensive report on the implementation of the development agreement and the conditions of approval for Rancho Vista. And in the course of that conversation, Meritage Homes, the developer, presented to the City Council a revised lotting pattern for 3rd Street, which addressed many of the concerns raised by the community and by the City Council and perhaps by commissioners themselves. So they're now proposing 5 lots fronting on 3rd Street in the area behind the Creek Bridge subdivision in so-called Phase 7. Those 5 lots would be found to be in substantial conformance with the tentative map, so the issue of conformance with the tentative map has been resolved. The conditions of approval that you recommended and the council adopted provide that no more than 70% of the houses on a street segment shall be 2-story. So no more than 3 of the 5 may be 2 stories. So 2 of the houses on 3rd Street will be 1 story, 3 will be 2 story. The City Council also approved an amendment to the development agreement by which Meritage will increase its contribution to solve the city's water problems by $100,000. So they will now, combined with all of their commitments that are voluntary, plus their sewer and water connection fees, they'll contribute $1 million toward the city's water supply strategy, which the council has adopted at an earlier meeting. The City Council also approved participation in a statewide program that allows the fees to be levied against Meritage to be paid through assessments on the homeowners themselves. It's called SCIP, the Statewide Community Infrastructure Program, SCIP. And the City Council authorized us to reimburse Meritage for the construction of the 18-inch sewer line that would potentially connect to the future relocation of the wastewater treatment plant, which the general plan suggests needs to be done to the north of that site. So the City Council heard the comprehensive report on the implementation of the development conditions. Conclusion, they're all being met. They amended the development agreement to increase the contribution toward water by $100,000. They heard and the presentation from Meritage that they were going back to the 5 lots on 3rd Street, and we approved participation in SCIP. Do you have any questions about Rancho Vista? I'd be happy to respond.
When I watched that online, I had trouble following a portion of the discussion. So the issue of the city reimbursing them for that future sewer line, how does that offset the cost that they would be paying, the $100,000 plus their normal connection fees? I mean, what would we actually net? Do we have an estimate of that?
Well, first I want to distinguish water from sewer. So the water connection fees plus their water contributions will be $1 million. In addition to that, they have sewer connection fees. And under the reimbursement agreement, they will be credited for the cost of installing the sewer line against those fees. So to the extent that the actual costs equal to or exceed their fees, we'll owe them some money. To the extent that it's less, they'll still owe the difference in fees.
Okay, got it.
But we just don't know what that is at this point.
Well, we have an estimate that it's going to be just about the amount of their fees, but the actual construction costs is yet to be submitted to us and audited.
Out of curiosity, what's all the bulldozing and this happening there on First Street, right off, right there at the entrance? Seems like they've been digging in there for months.
Roundabout, isn't it?
I just kind of, it's just like a hole in
That's where the connection's going in.
So a very significant part of their public improvements was the construction of a new culvert underneath a bridge. Right, before they can build the bridge, they have to build the culvert that's going to carry the water through the creek.
Okay.
And they had to wait to dewater that creek. They had very significant conditions imposed by the California Fish and Game people.
Okay.
The roundabout is not yet under construction.
Has the adjacent properties, they haven't? No, wow, I don't know. I don't think so.
So to construct the roundabout, in the map, the Meritage people have dedicated the appropriate right-of-way. We need some additional right-of-way across the street from the Loasa's property. They intend to submit a parcel map for the development of their property, and with that parcel map, they will dedicate the remaining right-of-way needed for the roundabout.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's all I had.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Community Development Director, any comments? Okay. If there's no more comments from the commission, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Here's the